Before we begin, a brief explanation. Around a year ago, I produced a couple of posts for the Overlooked Hotel's sister site Desperate Living that felt as though they didn't quite belong there. Desperate Living was still new at the time and in search of an identity, and these studies of historical curiosities didn't really fit. In fact, the posts were the motivation for me to start this site as an outlet for lost histories and strange tales from the past. And I've long felt that the documentaries in question belong here rather than there. As I now prepare for a reboot of Desperate Living to give it a more specific focus, the time seems right for me to finally rework those videos and post them here on the Overlooked Hotel, a channel far more suited to them. What you're about to watch is the first, and I'll be dropping the others in over the next few weeks. So if this feels curiously familiar, well, that'll be why. Imagine if this was the official symbol of the UK Labour Party. Well, if one politician had had his way, that's exactly what would have happened. Among the more curious items in the Desperate Living library is a 1918 edition of H.P. Blavatsky's Theosophical Glossary, which was first published in 1892. Blavatsky, an omnipresent figure in the worlds of 20th century neo-religion, cult and occultism, magic and science, not to mention conspiracy theory, is someone who's far too complex a tale for us to go into here, though both she and Theosophy certainly warrant a further examination in the future. When I bought this book from a Bloomsbury bookshop in the early 1990s, I had little knowledge of the subject and was attracted by the arcane symbols on the cover, and more so by the fact that it had been heavily annotated by what looks to be at least 3 different people over a period of decades up to 1969, with assorted news clippings and typed editions inserted throughout. Clearly this was a much used reference volume for a number of people before it slipped into my possession. As such, it manages to be more than it otherwise might have been, even though the glossary of occult, religious and philosophical ideas is in itself fascinating enough. Among the clippings is a curious piece from an unidentified newspaper dated the 23rd of November 1933 and headlined Modern Magic. It's a strange bit of comical political trivia that, if taken up, might well have changed the way we see the modern labour movement. To quote, "This is a period when no political movement seems to regard itself as complete without a badge or symbol of some sort, a point that was made by Lord Ponsonby in a speech last weekend when he referred to the hammer and sickle, the fasces and the swastika. His own suggestion was the British Labour movement should adopt the pentangle, that 5-pointed star sometimes called a pentagram. His idea was that the 5 angles of the figure would represent what he specified as the main 5 points of policy for the present socialist movement in this country." Lord Ponsonby, formerly Labour politician Arthur Ponsonby and fully titled 1st Baron Ponsonby of Shoolbred, had been the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Under-Secretary of State for Dominion Affairs and Parliamentary Secretary to the Ministry of Transport, before being made a hereditary peer in 1930. He was a noted peace campaigner in the lead up to World War II, and by 1937 was chair of the International Council of War Resisters International. He was what we now might call a political rebel within his own party, but there's no suggestion that he was an occultist or even a mischief maker, and so we can only assume that his suggestion that Labour adopt the pentagram as their symbol was a sincere, if wildly misguided, belief that this would be a fine bit of branding. This isn't the place to go into the long history and often deliberate misunderstanding of this symbol, but given that the pentagram was already firmly associated in the public mind with magic and occultism, as the news clipping itself jovially points out, as well as having a connection to Masonic rituals at the time, it's curious to imagine how this might have gone down if Labour had taken his suggestion seriously. It seems a remarkably easy way for their political opponents to suggest that they would be untrustworthy and manipulative rulers. With the current right-wing obsession with Satanism lurking around every corner, a left-wing political party using such a symbol would probably just confirm the worst fears of the lunatic fringe of Christian conspiracy theorists everywhere. And you'd have to wonder how Wiccans, Satanists and others might feel at the prospect of the pentagram being adopted for political purposes. It would surely be like the swastika, a religious symbol of divinity and spiritual peace, being stolen and degraded by the Nazis. And before anybody gets worked up, no, I'm clearly not equating the Labour Party to the Nazis, so settle down. But you do wonder why political movements or their supporters feel that they have the right to, dare we say, appropriate existing symbols that already have specific meanings. Just invent your own, please. In any case, Ponsonby's suggestion seems to have been little more than the sort of loony comment made by loose cannon politicians who need to fill out a speech, and it clearly didn't get anywhere, to the presumed relief of both Labour supporters and occultists. Allowing the former not to be tarred with the brush of being either witches or devil worshippers, still unfortunately not great selling points to the great unwashed, and the latter free to wear things like pentagram bikinis without showing any political allegiance. If you've enjoyed this dip into strange and forgotten history, by all means please hit that subscribe button, hit the likes, set your alerts, share with friends, and support us on Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.